From now on, you will speak only when spoken to, and the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be served.
Hey, what's up everyone, it's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're gonna be taking a look at Full Metal Jacket. If we take a look at the film in its entirety, it's hard not to see it as two distinct movies. You've got the boot camp sequence, largely featuring Private Pyle and Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Then Private Joker goes to Vietnam, where he's hit with the reality that war is in fact hell. I think I'm in the majority when I say the first half was more memorable, though in saying that, both parts are complementary and definitely needed. On that note, let's get right into the video. Here are 30 facts you didn't know about Full Metal Jacket. Douglas Milsone, Kubrick's longtime cinematographer, described how demanding working with him could be. You eat, drink, and sleep the movie, and you're under contract to Stanley, body and soul. And Matthew Modine learned this the hard way when his wife unexpectedly had to get a C-section. Modine knew he couldn't just not show up to work, so he quickly made his way there and told Kubrick what was happening. To his surprise, Kubrick used every ounce of his logical reasoning to try and stop him from going. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand in the operating room? You'll faint as soon as they cut her open. You'll see all that blood and you'll pass out. Modine told him, "No, I have to go." But Kubrick ignored him and gave reason after reason why he didn't need to be there. So Modine did what he had to do, pulled out a knife, and told him, "Look, I'm going to cut my hand open and I'm going to have to go to the hospital. Or you can let me go to the hospital to be with my wife." Kubrick finally relented and told him to come back right away. But here's the crazy thing. Modine wasn't even scheduled to film that day, and he ended up not even filming for another 3 days after that. The opening sequence of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman kindly welcoming the new recruits to boot camp is, in my opinion, the highlight of the film. One thing you'll notice is that the scene called for a 360-degree shooting approach as Hartman walks in circles around the room. This meant that all the lighting had to be stationed outside, as any inside would be picked up in the shot. So to give the set a natural feel with sunlight streaming in, they had 24,000 watts burning outside each of the windows. In the film, during the scene in the conference room, there's a sign posted on the wall that reads, "We will defend to the death our right to be misinformed." Vincent D'Onofrio holds the record for the most weight gain for a movie role at 75 pounds. D'Onofrio explained how being 280 pounds literally made people treat him differently. "Women didn't look at me. Most of the time, I was looking at their backs as they were running away. People used to say things to me twice because they thought I was stupid." And much like how his character had difficulties with the obstacle course, D'Onofrio did as well. And he actually injured his knee so badly on the course that he had to get surgery to fix it.
Get the f off of my obstacle! Get the f down off of my obstacle! Now!
The story behind R. Lee Ermey's journey to getting the role of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman is truly fascinating, and easily one of the most unlikely feats of persistence I've ever heard of. If you didn't already know, Ermey was formerly a drill sergeant, which honestly explains a lot. Once he left the military, Ermey decided on a new path: acting. He took some classes, then came up with a plan to break into Hollywood. He was going to use his credentials from the military to become a technical advisor on movie sets, then convince the director that he should be starring in the film. An audacious plan, but by the time Full Metal Jacket came around, Ermey had already pulled it off twice, in the movie The Boys in Company C and Apocalypse Now. After viewing Ermey's performance as Sergeant Lois in The Boys in Company C,
You won, but you lost, dummy! You left half of your baton behind the enemy line!
Kubrick was unconvinced that he possessed the viciousness needed to play Hartman, so Ermey enacted his plan for a third time and joined the film as the technical advisor, while Tim Colseri signed on as Sergeant Hartman. Then, as he'd done in the past, Ermey recorded an audition tape that displayed every bit of viciousness that Kubrick was looking for, and the role was his. Sadly, this was at the expense of Tim Colseri, who'd already spent hundreds of grueling hours rehearsing to play Hartman, though he did receive a small consolation prize and was recast as the door gunner.
Yes, sir! Yes, sir! Yes, sir!
Stanley Kubrick was definitely not the type of filmmaker who included references in his films to previous works. That is, with one exception. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket, 7 diamonds make a recurring appearance in each of the films. Which begs the question, what was Kubrick trying to convey? To be honest, I really don't know, and your guess is as good as mine. In Full Metal Jacket, Joker famously dons both a peace sign and the words "Born to Kill" on his helmet, which he gets some shit for.
You write "Born to Kill" on your helmet and you wear a peace button. What's that supposed to be, some kind of sick joke?
I think I was trying to suggest something about the duality of man, sir.
The what?
The duality of man, the Jungian thing, sir.
Going off the statement about the duality of man, as Joker is about to finish off the Vietnamese sniper, he slowly turns, covering the peace sign. To play the cutthroat Sergeant Hartman, R. Lee Ermey wrote over 150 pages worth of insults to use on the poor actors. Because of his mastery in breaking down and insulting the recruits, Kubrick allowed Ermey to improvise almost half of his dialogue. This led to some pretty hilarious sequences on set, an example being in the opening scene.
I bet you're the kind of guy that would a person in the and not even have the common courtesy to give him a reach around.
Kubrick immediately yelled cut and asked Ermey, "What the hell is a reach around?" Ermey explained what it was and why it was uncourteous, and Kubrick agreed and told him to carry on.
I'll be watching you.
When Sergeant Hartman bestows Leonard with the nickname Gomer Pyle,
"From now on, you're Gomer Pyle."
This was actually a reference to the TV show Gomer Pyle, USMC. And while the Gomer Pyle of the TV show wasn't mentally challenged, like the Gomer Pyle of Full Metal Jacket, it's easy to see why Hartman would call him that.
What's your name?
Gomer Pyle.
The original script featured a much different ending to the film in that Joker didn't survive. It was only after multiple conversations with Matthew Modine that Kubrick decided to change it. Modine told him he should live Stanley, because that's the real horror and the real tragedy of war. Having to spend the rest of your life having experienced the things that Private Joker experienced.
I'm in a world of shit. Yes, but I am alive. And I am not afraid.
In a strange, roundabout way, Val Kilmer may have actually helped Matthew Modine secure the part of Joker. It all came about from a chance encounter between the two at a restaurant. Modine was eating with a friend when they saw Kilmer, and the friend decided to introduce them as they'd never met before. But when Kilmer came over, he was less than enthused and reportedly said, "Yeah, I know who you are. I'm sick of you. Now you're doing Kubrick's film." Modine explained how he'd recently gotten a string of big parts in Birdie, Mrs. Sophel, and Vision Quest, roles that Kilmer was up for as well, but obviously lost out on. The only thing was, Matthew Modine wasn't doing Full Metal Jacket yet. In fact, at that stage, Kubrick didn't even know he existed, but this random encounter set off a light bulb inside Modine's head, which led to him calling up his manager. They sent in audition tapes, and as the saying goes, the rest is history.
I sure do like shooting people.
I sure do like shooting people.
To put it lightly, R. Lee Ermey had a very unique way of rehearsing. It consisted of Kubrick's assistant, Leon Vitali, throwing tennis balls and oranges at him, which Ermey had to catch and throw back as quickly as possible while saying his lines and not missing a beat. Any slip up and they'd start over. This was repeated until 20 error-free runs were achieved. As a result of this ludicrous style of rehearsal, Ermey's dialogue was so immaculate that for most scenes, Kubrick only required him to do around 2 or 3 takes. To put that in perspective, Kubrick demanded that most scenes be shot around 10 or 15 times, while some had to be refilmed a whopping 30 to 40 times. There was, however, one scene with Ermey that had to be filmed over and over. It was the part with the jelly donut, and it took a total of 37 tries to get it just right.
Open your mouth. They're paying for it. You eat it. Ready? Exercise.
Although Stanley Kubrick was a filmmaker and had a pilot's license, it's been said he had a serious phobia when it came to flying. This meant that after his move to England in the early 60s, he absolutely refused to travel to make his remaining films. Full Metal Jacket was no exception, and every scene, big or small, was filmed in his adopted home country. The problem was, England of course looks nothing like Vietnam. So to create a more authentic looking environment, he had 200 palm trees flown in from California and also imported over 100,000 tropical plants from Hong Kong. Here's how long Full Metal Jacket took to finish filming. Oliver Stone got the go-ahead to make Platoon based on the fact that Kubrick was also making a Vietnam War film, and then beat him to the box office by a full 6 months. A huge reason for this was a car crash that R. Lee Ermey suffered right in the middle of filming. He broke all the ribs on one side of his body, and it was 4.5 months before he was alright to finish shooting. Full Metal Jacket was certainly not shy with its graphic depiction of war, although some scenes went a little too far and had to be cut. The first of these scenes involved a game of soccer played not with a soccer ball, but a human head. The second would have taken place in the ending sequence with the dying sniper. Instead of Animal Mother telling Joker to put the sniper out of her misery, he takes it upon himself and decapitates her. Mirroring their on-screen relationship, Matthew Modine and Vincent D'Onofrio didn't exactly get along on set.
You really look like today, Leonard.
Modine said it all started when D'Onofrio got on his case for joking around with extras on the set. You see, D'Onofrio was from the Lee Strasberg School, or method acting, while Modine studied under the Stella Adler way, which was more focused on acting from imagination. Modine explained how he just got weirder and weirder as he went into this world his character was entering into. Because of all this, Modine said he often wonders about the towel scene, and if it was, here's a couple for the movie and here's a couple from me, you f***er. Though in the end, Modine says it was all in pursuit of making something great, and the two are still good friends to this day. The name of the film, Full Metal Jacket, has in many ways become more popular than the actual definition of the phrase, a term that describes a casing of a bullet. And funny enough, Full Metal Jacket is never once mentioned in The Short Timers, the book which the movie's based on. Kubrick decided not to use the title of the book for the movie because he feared people might think it was about folks who only did half a day of work. So, in his research for what to name the movie, he came across a gun catalog that had the phrase Full Metal Jacket. Deciding whether or not to get the hooker, Joker says the following.
Be sure you only f the ones that cop.
And if we go back a couple seconds, this happens.
The other half got TB.
Gustav Hasford was the author of The Short Timers and a bit of a wild card. Although Kubrick adapted his book into Full Metal Jacket, the pair only met once, a dinner which ended with Kubrick passing a note to his friend that read, "I can't deal with this man." From there, the relationship soured to the point of a dispute in the form of screenwriting credits. Hasford felt he deserved a full screenwriting credit, while Kubrick only wanted to give him an additional dialogue credit. This lasted a full year until Kubrick finally relented and gave Hasford what he wanted. When asked about it, Hasford said he threatened to go to the press and tell them, "Hey, I'm a Vietnam veteran and Kubrick's ripping me off." During filming of the boot camp scenes, R. Lee Ermey would yell at the actors for up to 10 hours a day. Also, to give a more convincing performance on both sides. The cast never met Ermey prior to filming, they didn't rehearse at all together, and hanging out between takes was strictly forbidden.
I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Contrary to what you might think of Stanley Kubrick after watching Full Metal Jacket, the man was supposedly a huge animal lover. It's even been said he once gave his family 15 pages of instructions for how to take care of his cats. So when a family of rabbits was killed by an explosion during filming, Kubrick was so distraught, he told everyone to take the rest of the day off. When it came to Private Pyle's mental breakdown, the film stayed pretty true to the book apart from one small detail. Right before Sergeant Hartman gets shot, he smiles. The book describes it as an evil smile, and then he says, "Private Pyle, I'm proud," before Pyle shoots him. He never gets to finish that statement, but we can assume that Hartman was proud he finally made Pyle into a killer even at the expense of his own life. A cool little detail from the book that I wish made it into the script.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
This scene provides some very subtle foreshadowing of Private Pyle's rampage. If we slow things down, you can see that Private Pyle's been collecting ammunition as evidenced by a supposedly spent magazine still having bullets in it. As anyone who's seen the film could tell you, Matthew Modine played Private Joker, and his real name is never spoken. He goes by Private Joker during training, and then after, he's promoted to Sergeant Joker. Although, during one run-through of the obstacle course, we get a quick glimpse of his name. J.T. Davis is a reference to the first man killed during ground combat in Vietnam, Specialist James T. Davis. Vincent D'Onofrio first heard about the role of Private Pyle through Matthew Modine. At the time, D'Onofrio was working as a bouncer at a nightclub and barely had any acting experience. But he figured, screw it, I might as well try. So he rented a video camera, dressed up in some army fatigues, and gave it his best shot. D'Onofrio really wasn't expecting anything to come out of it, so when he heard back saying he got the part, he didn't believe it and thought it was his friends pulling a prank. When Joker and Rafterman are taking pictures of the mass grave, there's a woman on the edge of the shot doing the same thing. While her identity is never mentioned in the film, it was actually Stanley Kubrick's daughter, Vivian. She also wrote the film's score under the alias Abigail Mead, and additionally filmed 18 hours of behind-the-scenes footage for a documentary about the making of Full Metal Jacket, though strangely enough, it was never released. If we take a look at the cast of Full Metal Jacket, you can see that it wasn't a star-studded production by any means. But many of the roles were almost played by A-listers who fell through or turned it down for one reason or another. First, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who turned down Animal Mother to star in The Running Man. Then you've got Denzel Washington, who missed out on playing 8-Ball because he didn't like that Kubrick refused to send out scripts. Anthony Michael Hall was all set to be Joker until they couldn't reach a financial agreement. Bruce Willis had to decline an unnamed role because of the TV show Moonlighting. And finally, Ed Harris said no when Kubrick asked him to take on the role of Hartman, a decision he regrets. In accordance with the character he played, Matthew Modine kept a diary in which he recorded the entire process of making Full Metal Jacket. This was somewhat of a rare opportunity, as Kubrick was notorious for keeping his film sets closed off, though he encouraged Modine to write things down as a way to further engross himself in the role. The end result was the limited edition book, Full Metal Jacket Diary, complete with an embossed metal jacket. During Cowboy's death sequence, you can see a structure in the background that looks very much like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'd like to think there's some deep hidden meaning behind why it's there, but according to Kubrick himself, it was totally unintentional. Like many films, Full Metal Jacket was filmed out of order, with the scenes in Vietnam being shot first, and then the boot camp second. This means that the very first scene filmed was on the streets of Da Nang, while the graduation sequence was the final scene they shot. Hey, I appreciate you all watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.